So, hello everyone. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Siddharth Poddar. I go by Sid. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Polestar Analytics, building our wonderful platform called One Platform, which includes data nexus and agenthood. And I'm based out of Houston, Texas. And today, I have a very, very special guest with us for the next session of BODHI. So, BODHI, as you know, is one of the leading webinar series across the globe today on data and analytics space. BODHI brings together industry veterans to talk about simple topics and demystify some of the intricacies of complex topics. We have had tremendous love about BODHI from some of our past episodes. We had so many amazing people. The CIO of Kellogg Company joined us, Morgan Page from Weaver joined us. And today, I'm very, very delighted to introduce our next speaker for today, which is Pritam Debnath. Pritam is a very good friend based out of Houston, Senior Director of Enterprise Application Engineering at Sysco. So people who do not know, Sysco is what powers majority of cafeterias across multiple corporates and schools all over the globe. It is one of the world's largest food service distributor and a Fortune 100 company. And at Sysco, which is spelled SYSCO, Pritam is the Senior Director of Engineering. He has over 20 years of experience and he leads enterprise application engineering, ERP modernization, and most importantly, he also leads the entire AI-powered digital transformation at Sysco. He oversees global team to develop strategy and executes upon them. In his spare time, Pritam is an avid chess player. So if you want to find him, you log in at midnight Eastern time, Central time, and you would find Pritam playing chess on chess.com. So thank you so much, Pritam, for taking time to speak with us today. Really, really appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule. Welcome to BODHI.
Yeah, thanks, Sid. Thank you for making me feel important, old, jazzy, all at the same time. So jokes apart.
Now, the fancy word is experience. It's not old. Thank you for feeling experienced.
Yep. I especially you latch onto those words once you are like 15, 20 years experience,
correct.
right? So yeah. Pritam here, everyone. As Sid said, this is my actually 21st year in the industry, and I have been pretty much I'm professionally born and brought up in Sysco, and as Sid said, Sysco is one of the largest food services distributor across the world, and definitely the largest in the US. And currently I lead the engineering. I'm an engineering senior director in Sysco. I wear a couple of vertical hats and a couple of horizontal hats. From a vertical standpoint, I lead the roadmap, technology delivery, and end-to-end execution of Sysco's inbound supply chain and merchandising technology. So that includes demand planning, forecasting, purchase order lifecycle management, assortment planning, supplier collaboration, inbound logistics, among others in terms of capabilities. So all the digital transformation that is happening in that area. And then from a horizontal perspective, I work on our ERP modernization strategy across our US broadline companies. And also, I work very closely on our agentic strategy and platform, as well as tech strategy and innovation. So, as Sid said, good friend, and I really respect what Sid and overall Polestar has done over the last few years, and yeah, just looking forward to be in this podcast.
Great. Thank you so much, Pritam, for that amazing introduction. And thank you again for taking time. So, Pritam, let's start with the basics. As I was mentioning before our introduction, that agentic AI is one of the most used, and I would say, if I can, don't put me on the record, but abused terms, anything and everything gets passed on as agentic AI nowadays. So let's start at that basic level, that people have conflicting definitions. Different market research companies provide definitions of agentic AI that are different. In your opinion, how do you define agentic AI, and what sets it apart from other forms of AI? Can you help our audiences understand a little bit?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you chose the right word in terms of what's your opinion, because it is at this point of time, The topic is evolving at a breakneck speed. So yeah, in how I see agentic AI, right? And if you look at let's take a step back, right, and talk about AI in general, because there's a lot of confusion in terms of we still haven't actually AI has been here almost forever. A lot of time we kind of confuse AI with machine learning, right? Whereas how I see it is, AI is a broader superset, if I can say that, right? And as the name suggests, artificial intelligence. So anything that a person does, if there is certain, if we automate, if we introduce certain intelligence to a system which automates that piece, I think we can legitimately call it AI, right? But not all AI is machine learning, where machine learning is a subset, how I see it, of AI. Um, and again, in machine learning also, you have the classical machine learning, right? With all the classifications and regressions and ensemble and unsupervised learning and whatnot. And then of course you have a broader another subset of machine learning, which essentially is deep learning. And then how when we are talking about transformers and LLM, that I see this as a evolution of deep learning, right? And eventually, as we all know, um, like AD and VC, it's almost like the pre 2023 November and post 2023 November, to pre Chat GPT and post Chat GPT, where generative AI kind of got into the forefront. And then eventually it's kind of evolving into not just providing and generating content and providing answers, but actually doing something, right? And that's kind of where I think agentic AI distances or like differentiates itself from the other sides, where it does not only just answers question like in a traditional chatbot or an LLM powered chatbot, but it also acts on the user's behalf, right? That's where digital agents come into picture. So again, long story short, if I have to define agentic AI, I think it's a subset of AI. It's a natural evolution of generative AI, where we have agents which autonomous is a very important part here, right? Which autonomously decides, which autonomously learns, and it autonomously acts, right? And when I again say autonomous, I use it with a pinch of salt,
Of
because
course.
there is, and we can talk about it, that there is, of course, the human in the loop portion of it. But yeah, that's how I would broadly define agentic AI, Sid.
Awesome, Pritam. So how I'm understanding is that while traditional AI used to be a passive tool in the hand, which a user will go invoke and find information from, an agentic AI is like a active digital teammate that is available for me, who works on his own but may need some guidance. Okay, may need
Yeah,
some
absolutely.
guidance, may need some inputs.
Yeah, and a lot of these agentic use cases, a classical ML model can be a
Hmm.
data signal which is fed to an agent, right? So it's not an or, it's actually complementing each other. A lot of time, a data science model's output is the input to a digital agent, which is using that then to update something in a system, right? Or to act on itself. So yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, very nice. And this, it's going to be a journey for organizations to go from this automation to autonomy, right? It cannot happen overnight. There is so much of control that people need over the data, and I don't think AI is currently. I would love to get your views on it as well. That AI is there where we can continuously rely on it for full autonomy. There is
Yeah.
a element of continuous review that needs to be added in all implementations for now.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a great point. That's also something that I think we should discuss, right? A lot of time, whether internally or externally, when I interact with people, talk. There is a constant theme that I see, that okay, so we had things like RPA, right? and RPA is still relevant. I mean, and there is a constant chatter around, okay, is agentic going to be like agentic versus RPA, or APA, or agentic process automation versus RPA, or robotic process automation. How I see this said, and exactly to your point, right? I don't see this as a versus. I see this as an and, right? Where
Correct.
um, a lot of time, I think we need to understand, kind of related to my first answer, that not all agents need machine learning.
Correct.
Not all agent needs a lot of intelligence. Yes, the orchestrator needs intelligence in terms of
Intelligence.
how do you, because at the end of the day, right, what is an agent doing? An agentic automation is very much coupled with the future of workflow. How do I handle a workflow? A workflow can be handled by human, a workflow can be handled by agent completely autonomously, and then a workflow can be handled by a combination of human and agent, right? And that's where this journey comes from, automation to autonomy. And whether it is an RPA or a bot, right, or whether it's an API, these are all tools that an agent or a digital worker can have to
Can
perform the
access.
task, right? So if I have to put a human body analogy, right? Think of, I look at an RPA bot or an API, like any tool, as hands, right? And an agent, a lot of time, these orchestrators as a brain, right? So you really don't tell brain versus hand, right? You don't really pick and choose, right? Then it's not a good thing to have. I think the same can be kind of replicated in the digital world as well.
Very nice. Now that's an amazing segue to the next curiosity I have about the architectural consideration in building an agentic AI system. So as I understand from your points that there is going to be an orchestration hub that will manage different agents. There should be a memory layer to understand the context. And then there are modular business specific agents that will solve a particular business problem. So from that context, can you speak a little bit about the key architectural patterns for building an agentic AI systems? What
Yeah.
components does an organization
Yes.
need to think?
Correct, absolutely. And when I look at an architecture, right, I think it's two dimensional. At least my answer would be two dimensional.
Mhm.
One is a functional architecture in terms of how do you plan agents, right? How do you plan agentic automation, right? So let's talk about that first. So, and you are right. I think how I look at it is, and actually, a lot of companies are actually doing this. In Cisco, also, we are actively working on this. I see in Walmart there are work which is happening there in terms of what people are calling as super agents, right?
Okay.
So essentially, there is a kind of a super orchestrator or super agent, and then what can happen in there could be domain based super agents, right? So
Okay.
do I have a super agent for customer experience? Do I have a super agent for inventory management, for example,
Okay.
right? Do I have a super agent for outbound operations, right? And then those super agents, right, or orchestrator agent, however you call it, or domain orchestrator, we can use these terms interchangeably. So we have two options. In any case, we always have two options. One option is empower the super agent so that it can handle multiple tasks, right? The other option is don't load the super agent itself, but then empower the super agents with very specific, like domain specific specialized agents, right? So then what happens is it becomes modular, number one. Number two, it becomes easier to debug, it becomes easier to train, most importantly, because as again, I love to give real life analogy, or physical life analogy, right? So think of a physical worker, let's say you or I, right?
Mhm.
If you or I are interested with no team, right, and given a task of hold just managing, let's say, inventory management all by yourself or myself, um, can we not do it? Yeah, we probably can, based on the experience, which in this case translates to learning and memory, right? That we have. See, I'm using age in a positive way. I'm telling
Yeah,
experience.
yeah.
And or but that might not be the best way to go about it, because as complexities increase and as we scale up, right, it's not feasible, possible for one human being, right, to be the be all and know all, right? And
Correct,
number
correct.
one, it involves risks, right? So you are the single point of failure. So what do we typically do? We the organizations empower people like you on and me and so many others, right, with teams. And then we orchestrate, right? We orchestrate the work. So I have a team which is very specifically for an application, then another application, another team. So those are the people who are actually boots on ground, who is actually doing the work, right? And those are like the specialized human agents, right? And what we are doing is we are understanding what the problem is because of our domain knowledge, because of
Mhm.
our experience. We are making sense out of it, and we are telling, okay, for task one, let me take help of my team member one, right, Sid.
Right,
For
right.
task two, let me take help of like Divyanshu, right? So exactly put that in the digital landscape, right? In this case, you or I, in just in the examples, right, we are the domain orchestrator or the super agent, right? But it's always better to have it modularized into our team, which are the list of group of super agents, and then they have tools, right,
Correct, correct,
uh,
correct.
to actually do the work. So that's how I look at from a hierarchical perspective, that we have a super agent slash domain orchestrator, then a bunch of specialized agents, and those specialized agents use tools to perform the work and feedback, right? So that's how I see of a functional architecture. And then of course, any technical architecture is a component of that functional architecture, right? So for, of course, for
Absolutely.
all these, you have frameworks, you need memory, you need a basic, you need LLM to kind of make sense out of it. And then then RAG comes into picture to make sure that you don't hallucinate, you augment your knowledge or the model's knowledge with the data that is very specific to that company or that industry, etc. And then of course you have tools, right, which can be an API, could be a bot, right? So that's where kind of the technical architecture kind of evolves. But yeah, that's how I like to approach it. Like, first look at a human, then put it into an agentic, get
In
the
an
functional
agentic framework.
architecture, and choose the relevant tech stack slash framework for that.
Love the analogy, Pritam. It's so easy for people to comprehend. Like if I have to do some analytics, there is a separate team member whom I will entrust the Excel analytics. Then there is a separate team member who will do the PowerPoint, and there's a separate team member who is going to do the verbiage, and the fourth team member who is actually doing the presentation. So thinking of even these business problems in forms of different teams, and then thinking of agents who can do all of these, and then there is a project manager who orchestrates the 4 or 5 team members to achieve a particular objective. Amazing. So we spoke about what is agentic AI, where it is placed in the whole gamut of all types of artificial intelligence. We spoke about the architecture. At the end of the day, people do want to translate them into real world applications. Okay. So based on your experience, I'm sure there are hundreds of use cases you are working on and some have been implemented as well. Can you talk a couple of few exciting supply chain use cases where agentic AI is actually very powerful, either delivering value today or has a high potential to deliver value?
Yeah,
Something just as
no.
a food for thought for some of our
Yep,
listeners.
yep, no, absolutely. And this is something that it's not just for any company, but I'm seeing this trend in the industry as such, right? So see, if you look at supply chain and you just break it down into your general O2C and P2P, right? Order to cash and procure to pay. And then under order to cash, if you're looking at or maybe let's start with procure to pay, because that's the back end of it, right? So let's start with planning, right? So of course, that's needless to say, that's a big opportunity or use case for agentic AI. Forecasting itself is a sub-discipline in its own in machine learning, right? So I was talking about, in some cases, classical ML could be a feed to an agent. This is a classic use case for this. So forecasting, you have your forecasting algorithms, right? You have your forecasting models uh, that could then feed to an agent, right? A forecasting agent, which could which could really help the planners, right? The demand planners and all, um, make sense out of forecast anomalies, make sense out of forecast exceptions. Okay, I'm seeing a big deviation, or I'm seeing a big change in demand patterns. Is this a one time? Is this because of a certain event? Is this because of a weather or whatever? Or is this recurring? If this is one time, what do I do? If this is recurring, what do I do? Right. So I think that's a big that's a really solid use case, because typically I would spend hours analyzing this, right? So you have to go to multiple systems, you have to go to your forecasting system, you have to go to your ERP and all, synthesize the data, and then get to that decision that, okay, this is probably not this is probably not a regular pattern, this is going to be one time. So you know what, I would maybe make some certain adjustments, right, but will not reflect in the overall forecast, etc. So all this, from thinking about it, to take the decision, to actually act on it based on a certain confidence level, of course, because that's where human in the loop comes in. So it's a classic case for agentic AI, right? So that's on the forecasting side. Similarly, like inventory optimization. So you have hundreds of distribution centers, right, spread across globally, spread across US or wherever, right? And you see a risk in your service. You see a risk where you are at the risk of a stock out, right? So what kind of, so number one, that's a model, right, that could predict those risks and churn or recommend like actions, right, to mitigate that risk. Do I then transfer some of my inventory from a local nearby DC, right, distribution center, to mitigate that risk? So how do I optimize inventory across my distribution centers, so that my supply risk kind of minimizes, and my stock out risk minimizes? Those are classic examples. ETA calculations, be it outbound delivery or inbound delivery, that's a great agentic use case where you can really predict your ETA and based on that take action. So if my inbound truck, which is getting to my warehouses, that's kind of late, or I'm predicting that it will be late, how does that impact my inventory? So what kind of inventory decisions do I take out of it? Assortment optimization is another classic use case. Fulfillment, optimizing fulfillment, and that goes with inventory optimization in anyways. In the manufacturing world, like predictive maintenance, that could be a good agentic use case, right? And then, of course, we all know that the whole domain of customer service, uh, that is a huge use case for agentic AI, right? Where we kind of now take a lot of data, you vectorize, information and data, and help improve customer experience, right? So those are some, yeah. So those are some of the domain use cases that I see having a lot of prominence in the industry.
Definitely. So if I'm understanding correctly, for example, if I take the inventory use case that you mentioned, in background, the number of agents that are working, there is one agent that forecasts that when the inventory is going to get stock out. Then there is a second agent that determines, is there a warehouse nearby from which I can do the stock transfer. In case that stock transfer fails or we don't find, then it goes to a third agent that does, can I expedite the shipment from the vendor? Can I air freight it? Can I team truck it? If that is not possible, then it says, can I run promotion on an alternate product to manage the demand better, and so on. So the orchestration agent ensures that all of these 5, 6 agents are called in a sequence, and in a matter of minutes, the entire analytics is complete and a plan of action is prepared.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. And that actually augurs well with what we were just discussing before, right? This whole functional architecture of the super agent and then calling individual specialized agents. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, that's I think that's a much efficient way to go in terms of the super agent orchestrating and then different specialized agent doing their tasks the best way possible.
Great. So the logical thought process there then goes that since these agents are going to touch multiple teams, okay, and multiple people's roles are going to get impacted. I'm not necessarily saying they're going to get eliminated, but there definitely be productivity improvement and role definitions would change. So these organizational adoption then becomes a big challenge, right? Because these are huge transformation requiring buy-in from different teams. The team that manages the logistics network, they are going to push back. Then the team that is managing promotions, they are going to push back. That why is the system designing that? How do you secure alignment from all of these different teams for these agentic AI initiatives? Can you share some thoughts for our team of viewers here?
Yeah, I think and this is not just for agentic
Mhm.
AI. Actually, the same
Correct, correct.
structure holds good for any,
Any
I would
project.
say,
Any project.
innovation project,
Mhm.
right? The I think the first thing is, that's kind of the mantra that I believe in, that don't have that let's not have that mindset where we have a hammer and we are looking for nails, right? Which should be the other way around. So so I think that syndrome is very common, right? I mean,
Okay.
I can the and so everything needs to come from a use case, right? So
Right.
and we should not think in terms of, okay, what are my agentic use cases? I think
Mhm.
our thought process should be, what are the business problems
Business
that we
problems.
add value, and then we figure out, okay, so there are and that has nothing to do with agent or AI or anything. That has to and that's 101 in terms of prioritization, right? And so we identify those, and then we figure out that the second level is, okay, to mitigate that, is this really an agentic use case?
Mhm.
Is this if an RPA is good enough for this? Is it a low code use case? It could even be like a
Correct, correct.
system enhancement, right? So that's like number one to me, because then I think business, right, um, knows that, okay, here our technology partners, right, are not looking to just build agents for the sake of it. They are
Mhm.
really trying to. So that is where the spirit of partnership comes, right? Where we are actually trying to solve a problem together. So that immediately kind of enables better business alignment and business with and business and technology kind of co-creating, right? So that is always the first recipe for success, because if because the last thing that anyone wants is a technology project shoved down the throat, right?
Correct.
So I think that's number one, to get alignment. And then number two is constant awareness and constant education, because that's another thing, because there's a lot of noise, especially with so much information, and with information, of course, comes a lot of noise as well, right? So people can be really confused, like, okay, oh, you are saying this is an agent, but isn't this not an RPA? Isn't this not a system, etc.,
Mhm.
etc., right? System integration. So that's where I think constant feedback loop, constant education, constant awareness, that this is why this is an agent. This is why an RPA here makes sense, because it will be cost effective, I think. So
Correct.
long story short, thinking business problem first, focus on problem solving and not necessarily just on agents or any
Deploying agents.
trend. Number three, constant feedback loop, constant education and awareness, I think all combined. And fail fast, of course. I mean, that's agile 101, right?
Correct.
A lot of these from a technology perspective is evolving, so we have to have that spirit of experimentation, right? And I think we need to get out from a cultural perspective. I think we need to get out of that fear of failure, right? We should understand that we should know that if we are experimenting of 10 things, there is a high possibility that 6 of them might actually fail, right? What makes sense is to fail fast so that we don't incur a lot of expense doing that, and then just pivot, right? So all these, I think, are good ways to kind of have alignment and set not just technology but the organization up for success.
Absolutely. Now that 100% resonates with my personal thought process as well, Pritamji. That start small, show quick wins for people, get their alignment that hey, this is something that I'm not shoving down your throat, as you said. But I love that analogy. Many technology leaders often feel that now IT has a new tool, new hammer, and they are looking for nails to hit. So that should never be the thought process or communication to them. Anyway, so no conversation of any AI or initiatives is complete without talking about ROI definition. Okay. Do you have any thoughts for us on how do we build an ROI model for these agentic AI initiatives? At a very high level, because there are some short term benefits, there are some short term investments, and then there are really long term benefits. How do you
Yeah.
build a effective ROI model that justifies the investment?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's where I think concepts like FinOps come into picture, right? So when we are talking about agentic use case, it's very important to consider every aspect of the cost and every aspect of the benefit. And again, this is not just agentic. This can be relevant to any use case per se, right? But agentics very specifically, right? On top of the labor work that is needed, right? There is also a buy versus build analysis, right? In terms of, do I actually build those agents using, like, potentially one of the hyperscalers, using a platform, or do we actually build a platform itself, right? And I can see both having its own pros and cons, and it's actually a function of a lot of things, like the maturity, your tech maturity, or how strong or how mature is your technology organization, right? Because as there is always the good part of a lot of these hyperscalers and third party agents are that, of course, time to market. But how we look at it is, if this is something that is touching like your secret sauce to and something which is very specific to the domain, the functionalities, I think it makes sense to build, because anyways you have to configure. You have to customize some of these logic, right? Because at the end of the day, right? I mean, if you look at agentic, the thought process, the orchestration is one thing, but the true work is done by those hands, right? So you anyways have to build those logic which is actually updating those systems, right? So that's definitely, that's the build versus buy considerations. And then on top of it, whichever path you decide, right, you have to look at like the infrastructure piece, you have to look at the LLM cost, right, which is very important. You have to look at, like, your, not, as you rightly said, right, not just from a POC. And that's a very important point. A lot of these, and Gartner tells that all the time, that a lion's share of these agentic AI use cases never make it beyond POC, right? One of the reason being, the sometimes we are short-sighted and kind of look at an ROI from a POC perspective, but as we scale, then we kind of are on the wrong foot, because we have not taken into consideration certain aspects of the cost. So that's on the cost side of it. And then from a benefit perspective, right, there is tangible benefit. So, benefit could be, some of the examples that I was talking about, just as an example, right, for that forecasting agent, right? Are we improving forecasting accuracy, right? And that's kind of the easier part of it, because if there are easy ways to measure forecast accuracy, right? Whether it's the MAPEs of the world or RMSEs of the world. So that's the easy piece of it, I would say. And then how does that forecast accuracy translate to dollars, right? Does that mean I'm having this many less stockouts? Does that mean I'm having this much less inventory to store? So that means that I have less inventory carrying cost, right? So that's one angle to it. But then there are use cases which are not that straightforward also, right? So for example, cases related to customer service, right? We can definitely measure like what is the reduction of time for a particular call or a particular interaction with agents, right? And then of course there is a resource angle to it, but then there are other intangible things which we potentially can't put in numbers, like this customer satisfaction, right? Just and of course it can eventually translate to NPS score
Brand
and everything.
equity, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, just kind of putting a broad brush. Benefit side, look at both tangible and intangible, and cost side. Number one, do buy versus build analysis. Number two, whether you buy or whether you build, look at the sunk cost, look at the infrastructure cost, look at the run cost, and look at the TCO.
Absolutely. And there are many ways to optimize the cost part of it. I have seen several customers just use the GPT-4 when it was available. Okay, when a simple email transcription could have been done by O4 Mini, right? So they do not, and the cost difference is humongous. So when a needle can do the work, we don't have to bring the sword to the fight. So
Yeah,
we have to
absolutely, and that's where SLMs come into picture, right?
exactly.
Yeah, and especially on like operational use cases where where edge kind of we kind of have models closer to the edge, right? Whether it is warehouses, whether it is people on the go, and that's where LLM, we can't even afford an LLM, right? And that's where from a latency perspective also, SLM is the way to go, where you pretty much can have model running on your phone, right? So yeah, very good point, that that's where things like SLM versus LLM kind of analysis come into picture.
Correct. So people need to be open to interpretation and open to options. Like I love that OpenAI launched the GPT OSS models recently, where even the token cost could get significantly minimized if you can deploy them in house. But no, so that completes the questionnaire part of it. But I do have some rapid fire questions, Pritam, if you are up for it. I have about 10 or so. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a very, very loved portion of our Bodhi series where I'm going to ask you a few questions without much thought, whatever comes first to your mind. Okay, so let's go for it.
Yep.
One key skill needed, which is essential for all business leaders.
Learnability.
Yep. Okay. Biggest misconception about agentic AI?
That every agent needs a fancy ML model.
Wow, I love that one. That is the one myth that I try to bust every time I speak to customers. Every agent does not necessarily mean an intelligent and ML. A simple statistical agent is an agent. A simple mathematical formula, it could be an agent. Wonderful. Favorite AI innovation that is going on right now for you, personal favorite, which gets you excited?
That is a tough one because there are so many that is going on. It's kind of tough to keep up with it. I really don't have.
Okay, I'll keep that for our next coffee then.
Yeah.
Okay, think about it.
I don't have a personal favorite.
Absolutely. One technology, okay, that you see the biggest potential today in delivering value. Could be edge computing, could be agentic AI, could be simple other advancements that are happening around us.
Yeah, I mean, I would say considering the scale in which it is happening, I mean, I would say agentic AI at this point of time. Yeah.
How do you keep yourself up to date about the technology is changing that fast? By the time you wake up, there are 3 more models that are available in the market and each outperforming the previous night's one. How do you keep yourself up to date?
Yeah, I think, different like books, like I try to keep myself updated. I try to learn like at least half an hour, try to inculcate that discipline, right? And then, of course, podcasts like this, right? There are certain external and internal forums kind of bringing a community of practice. And last but not the least, and very important, having an open mind and knowing that it's okay to be outdated, and what matters is learnability to get yourself up to date as soon as possible.
Awesome. How do you measure whether an organization is actually succeeding at this AI game? How would a leader know that yes, my AI initiatives are working?
I think it's not just AI, right? The question is over. I think I would interpret this question again from
Okay.
an overall technology game, right? It's just ROI as we were talking, right? If a technology, whether it is agent, whether it is non-agent, is solving a business problem and the results in is visible and measurable, that to me is a measure for success.
Wonderful. So don't chase after the AI dream, only chase after the ROI dream. As long as ROI is being shown, that means you are succeeding in
Yeah,
life.
solve a problem. How it comes later.
Very nice. One last question from my side, and then we'll move on to audience questions. One piece of advice that you would offer to all the listeners to keep themselves up to date today's where so much of information overload is happening, cognitive overload is happening. How do you keep grounded and make sure that you continue your job and not get very concerned about the job losses that can potentially happen because of artificial intelligence? How do you keep yourself relevant for our
Yeah,
team
I mean,
members?
yeah, I mean, personally, and I'm no one to actually, preach per se, but
Mhm.
personally, I can only share what helps me personally,
Absolutely.
and it's not just for work. I keep a simple philosophy for myself is that you can only control the controllables, right? So in that sense, like don't really get too attached with the results, right? If you do your everyday process, if you have discipline and do your everyday process the best way that you can, results will take care of itself. I mean, results, success, failure, these are, and actually this is something that I try to live in and day out with my team. I tell this to my team every day that I'm actually pretty chill with failure. What I'm not very chill with is not trying, right?
Not trying, not
So
attempting.
so yeah, I mean, success and failures are transient. Today there is success, tomorrow there could be a failure, and it's fine. I mean, as long as we are learning, we are navigating through, and we are navigating through together with a smile. We are good.
Wonderful advice, Pritam, about Karma Yoga. Thank you so much again. That concludes the formal question and answer. We'll move on to audience Q&A now. Okay, let me check the Q&A section if we have any questions here. Wow, we have quite a bit. Okay, so let me
Yeah.
see. So one question has come that looking ahead, what are the most promising innovation and challenges in agentic AI that enterprises should start thinking over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, and my frank answer is I don't know.
Hmm?
Because I know that whatever I'm going to say might be totally different in a week from now, right? so
Absolutely.
so that 3 to 5 year horizon, and how we used to look at before, right? We used to plan for 3 to 5 years, sometimes even more than 5 years, right? If you
Mhm.
look at like 10 years back, we used to plan for a really long horizon. Now I think with the advent, with technology disrupting at such a breakneck speed, that 5 plus years or 3 to 5 years is almost now becoming to a more smaller horizon, right? So it's more short term planning and long term planning. So I'll talk about short term. I think some of the innovations and challenges in agentic AI that is today influencing a lot of the work and will continue to do is agent to agent communication. So as agentic frameworks, as agentic use cases are getting more ambitious, more cross functional in nature, I think MCPs and A2As,
Mhm.
the how multiple agents talk to each other, both externally and internally. I think that's something that is going to drive a lot of innovation in agentic AI.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pritam. The next question, actually, it's very well drafted. Okay. The agentic AI systems are becoming increasingly autonomous nowadays, right? With multi-step task execution, orchestration engine is taking care of a lot of activities. Okay. And there is a balance that is evolving between human oversight and the autonomy of these agents on their own. Where should organizations draw the line between efficiency and accountability? If everything becomes done by agents, suddenly there is nobody accountable, and you say, "Hey, I don't know, inventory was moved by the agent," but somebody has to be held accountable.
Yeah, I think that's where how I look at it, and is that we should not just focus on agents. We should
Hmm.
focus on the workflow, right? And agent is a part of the workflow, right? There is human in the workflow as well, right? So, for example, if we are talking again, just to give an example without being too theoretical about it, right? So, think of this whole example that we are talking about, this demand pattern, right? So,
Hmm.
there are, I'm seeing a bunch of, anomalies, and an agent can actually make sense out of it, and an agent can tell, okay, this is what it is and this is the recommendation, right? Now this is where I think the human in the loop comes into picture, where as part of a workflow it kind of comes to a system, right? The workflow management system, where they can either approve that recommendation or reject that recommendation.
Hmm.
And it can happen for, let's say, the next 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and then the agent, that's the beauty of agents or any learning system, is that if we see that out of the 1,000 recommendations that the agent is recommending, we are approving 900 and 900 plus of it, right? So that means the it can learn from those and automate and make the journey from automation to autonomy, right? And then people can really work on the true exceptions. So long story short, again, this is a great question, Divyanshu. How I see the line is exception management, exception management, exception management, right? So if I am managing 1,000 exceptions today, and with agents augmenting me, if I'm managing 100 exceptions tomorrow, right, then I can take care of two different tasks or two different responsibilities that I would not have otherwise taken,
Right.
right? So I'm especially for the domain specific use cases, I think it's more agent augmenting human being and not necessarily kind of it's an overall takeover. It might be for certain tasks, it might be, but I think for the more complex, the more decision intensive the task is, the more important the human accountability becomes.
Very nice. Thank you, Pritam. I'll take two more questions. The one that is piquing my interest is that your I would love to hear your views. It's a question from Vishal, okay, about can agentic AI adapt and learn from new situations without any reprogramming, unlike traditional automation? So how do you basically manage the drift part of the agents? How do you set up a system that can auto learn?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, right? But the tough part is now it's easier said than done, right?
Mhm.
Now, yes, and an agent can definitely adapt and learn from new situations without reprogramming. And that's where your knowledge base, your vector stores, and going technical here come into picture, right? Where new situations, the feedback loop which comes, and I was talking about this, that's exactly the example that I was giving in the
Mhm.
demand side of it, right? If that gets fed, and then we have our RAG capabilities enabled, agents can learn and adapt. But how I see it is, we have to see whether it is, we also have to see the cost towards it, right? Vishal, so it's a call. Does that make sense to, maybe if the outlier is like 10% or whatever, right, with the new situations, to invest on an agent to really learn? But on the flip side, it will be costlier, right? Because you have to have those that will incur cost from an LLM perspective, the reasoning perspective, vector source perspective, or you handle the outlier through programming, right? So that's where I see that there is not a, technically yes, but
Mhm.
whether we actually do it, I think that's an analysis
That's a decision that people have to
for
take.
that specific use case. And sometimes traditional automation makes sense. We can actually get traditional automation done in like really quickly without incurring a lot of cost, and if that's kind of covering the outliers, I mean, why not?
Makes sense. So we'll move to the last question of the evening, Pritam. I know you have other day jobs to take care of as well. So this one, it goes more forward looking. It's a question from Abhishek Jha. Okay, that hypothetically, suppose agentic autonomy has been achieved by an organization. What innovation are they looking forward beyond that? So verbally, with agentic system designing solutions in majority of business scenarios today, where do you see innovation to come post agentic autonomy has been implemented? Say we consider this on a basis of use cases. If you could identify some use case, what happens after agentic autonomy?
So first of all, when as and I think that's a great last question, because that kind of we come almost a full circle, right? Because I think in our first question we were talking about this whole journey, this whole point of the whole agenda. The title of this podcast was a journey from automation to autonomy, right? So do we really achieve full autonomy? I think that's a question, right? So I think it's a journey, and you might see that in some cases, yes, there will be 100% autonomy, and then there is some cases where it's 70% autonomy, it might be 50% autonomy, right? So tactically, so that there still will be innovation required in those areas, those domain, to get to push that boundary further and further and further, right? So that's one thing. Second thing is, you're talking about post agentic, innovations. We thought, right, that when traditional programming was there, right, we thought that, okay, that's kind of the end of
Best, yes.
people. Yeah, people would not have to, what will happen to people and all, right? The same thing. I mean, it is not like 70, this is even industrial revolution, right? Then AI came, like the traditional AI, and we asked the same question. Then ML, like more advanced machine learning came, we asked the same question. And then generative AI came, we asked the same question. So and this is something, I'm not a very quote person, but I like certain so this was this Jurassic Park thing, right, where this guy tells this dialogue, which I really like: life finds its way, right? So I think, yeah, I mean, life will find its way or something. It's kind of stuck with me. I think it's the same. So who knows? I mean, I'm pretty sure there are innovations, whether or not agentic, there, right? It's there today. I mean, today, how do you solve? I mean, with all our thing, we are still not solving like problems for ages, which is like inventory problems and supply chain problems, right? So with or without agents, we need to continue innovating to solve that problem, and I think those opportunities will always be there. It's a different matter whether you or I will be there by that time, but I'm pretty sure life will find its way.
Absolutely. No, optimization will continue. It's forever a journey that will happen. Keep on.
Yeah.
But no, thank you so much, Pritam, for taking time off your supremely busy schedule. Really, really appreciate. And thank you so much for all the audience today for joining in for our BODHI. Looking forward to our next BODHI session. But thank you, Pritam, for your time.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
a lot. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.